We're now moving on to the next portion of our afternoon, and I'm actually quite excited about this. I feel like I've been doing most of the speaking today, and I'm like, finally I can sit, and I'll relax, and I'll get advice from people who definitely know more than me. It's a conversation about the 21st century leader, what that exactly means, and I'm definitely elaborating with the right sort of people. These are winners of the 2015 Rising Star Awards in different categories, and I'll start off very simply by them actually introducing themselves. So let's start with you, Crystal Sampson.
Hi, Sia. Hi, everyone in the room. Christelle Sampson. I work at Standard Bank. Since having taken away the award for the Rising Star Awards in the banking and financial services sector, I've changed roles. I now look after innovation in our data analytics space.
Got it.
And yeah, just really pleased to be here with you today.
Thank you. Welcome,
Good
Christelle.
afternoon.
Moving over to Lee.
Hi, my name is Lee Naik. I've won the category for professional services. I've been with Accenture since 1998, if you'd believe it.
Wow.
So 17 years at the same company. And I look after all things digital within the Accenture organization.
Thank you. Welcome, Lee.
Hi everyone, I'm Michelle Ramnas. I'm a general manager.
Oh, okay, Michelle, you already have fans,
I've got a
clearly.
fan club. I'm a general manager with Bright House. I run the consulting services division, and I represent the ICT category in the Rising Star program, and really looking forward to an afternoon of interesting conversation.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us here. Now, before we get the conversation underway, it is about 21st century leaders, and we'll be discussing the challenges, really, that one can encounter when going for gold, really, and reaching the top. And leadership qualities and what they believe in, etc., etc. I think it would be a disservice, though, after, it's Jimmy Mani, Nzwanele Mani, was on stage, and we had quite an interesting conversation. And a certain Miss Christelle tweeted, now I'm going to put it on the spot, a few minutes ago, she said, Nzwanele telling us the cold, hard truth about how we're failing at transformation in South Africa. Private sector, stand up. Do you want to elaborate on that? I just feel we have to talk about that before we move on.
Yeah, sure. So we were having quite an interesting discussion at our table. We actually have human capital or human resource folk at the group, and we were talking about what we've managed to do with regards to transformation in South Africa, and in particular in the companies that we work in. And just following on from Jimmy Mani's statement around the fact that the private sector makes up, obviously, 70% of our economy.
Yeah.
I thought that it would be quite apt to obviously discuss the fact that, what are we doing? What's happening in the workplace where we are right now? And what should we be doing, and what role should we be playing as leaders in our own organizations to actually start moving transformation in a positive direction?
So in your opinion, not enough people are standing up and taking responsibility?
I think everybody's aware of the stats, but I don't think everyone is doing enough about it.
Fantastic. All right, so definitely get your pen and papers out and take mental notes galore. But more than that as well, you can hashtag AMRSS. We'll be paying attention to that. And you can tweet at Rising Star SA. So let's kick the conversation off about the 21st century leader. I'll just start off by asking each of you, what is your definition of a leader?
Lee, go for it.
So to me, a leader is one who shows by example. I think we've gotten past the point of just managing and looking after the P&L. But in this era right now, to drive transformation for the country, for your organization, it's one who's lived and walked the journey, surround himself with key individuals, be it guys or girls, whatever diversity, having the right group of people around you to drive the outcomes you want, and providing inspiration in that journey.
Got it. And in your opinion?
I think one of the key things for me is about being adaptable. If we look at, especially the IT industry, which I represent, it's such a dynamic, fast-paced, ever-changing industry, and what may have been your differentiator a few months back is most likely a commodity now. So you always have to stay ahead of the pack and always be constantly being able to respond to change. So adaptability for me is key for any leader.
My biggest thing is, what I hope we all get out of this, because I even count myself as the biggest student here, is the lessons that you each have encountered and learned in your personal paths. And it's great that you come up with these definitions, but I'd love to know where in your path did you discover that? So it's quite a broad question. So let's break it down more particularly. There's a quote that jumps out to me by Colin Powell, who says, "A dream doesn't become reality through magic. It takes sweat, determination, and hard work." So for you, Christelle, when did you, firstly, do you agree with that quote? And secondly, when do you think you realized that?
Sure, I suppose from a young age, I've probably been working as long as I could stand, but I think where it really stood out for me was in corporate South Africa. And everybody talks about the hard work and putting elbow to the wheel and really pushing, shoulder to the wheel and really pushing forward. And I think we've gotten to a point now where people are just exhausted. Everybody's pushing and pushing and pushing. And I think just to your first point around what it's going to take for us to actually lead into the 21st century and beyond, I think we really need to start looking at how we energize people and motivate them at the right time, in the right direction, and focusing on the right things. So yeah, I think that's probably a critical focus area for leadership, I think, going forward, because the models that we have right now are just not sustainable.
Yeah.
We've been lucky or fortunate enough to participate in quite a few discussions, and we've joined Leaders on the Move just recently. And we went to meet quite a few of the CEOs, Puti being one of them, from the Shanduka Group, around what it really takes to lead in the century and beyond. And the more we listen, the more we realize, and particularly for me, that it's just unsustainable, the amount of effort that has to go into adapting as quickly as possible, etc. We need to think differently about how we keep people energized and focused on the right things, prioritizing, and sweating for the right reasons, because sweat in itself, I don't think is going to get us there. It's about focusing on what's really important and what's going to make sure that we leave something behind that's in a better state that we found it in.
So many things I'd like to touch on there, complacency and how you keep on going forward and that determination. So we'll definitely do that later on in the conversation. What about you, Lee? When did you first realize that, okay, it's all good and well that I'd like a fancy certificate on my office wall, but now I actually have to put in the work?
Sure. I guess there's two reflections for me. I grew up in a place called Chatsworth, which is a township out in Durban.
You're from Durban.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I'm from Durban too. It's a Durbanite thing. It's very rare in a Gauteng. So anyone else from Durban? There we go. All my homies. Yes, Lee.
So I grew up in Chatsworth and had quite a rough surrounding environment growing up. And I guess one of the things that you need to figure out, and I probably in reflection think about this, you almost need to find your platform for change. So when you look around, you see adversity, diversity, poor role models. You almost become uncomfortable with this reality you find yourself in. So I think it's that very first inflection point that says you've got to work harder, you've got to put in more effort to actually create that change in your life. And I guess the way to think about it is when you look at those around you and you see qualities or attributes in those individuals that you don't want to be like, you found your platform for change. So that's the very first thing I did myself growing up, where you had to break out of the situation you found yourself in. More recently, when I hire people into the organization, I tell people all the time, recognize first and foremost, we don't expect you to know everything. I work in an organization that has 336,000 people. Somebody knows more than you. And the second you start to accept the fact that we don't expect you to know everything, you actually open up yourself to learn, to grow, to find leadership in other people, right? So we recognize it's a team sport. Success is something you actually start to work with hand in glove. And it's those reflections that tell me, for us to succeed as individuals, we can provide the best inspiration. If you don't put in the hard work and surround yourself by people that will help you grow and learn individually, or even those that will help you execute on your inspiration, you won't have driven the outcomes. Because when it comes down to it, we find ourselves in an outcome economy where things are tough. Interest rates are tough, job security is tough right now, and all that matters is not how we look. It matters what is the outcome of all the effort we've put in. And that's where the true leadership comes in, orchestrating the outcomes that make a difference to people that care.
I think it just boils down to one of my favorite quotes by Maya Angelou, who says, nothing will work unless you do. And that's a simple philosophy, really. But Michelle, don't you think I would have to assume that one of the hardest aspects of being a leader is almost being a trailblazer and being someone who takes the risk. You know, so often, and we see, I think it's accurate to say, that we see this pattern, you know, Lee touched on it, where in society, you just grow up in a certain environment where the majority of people are just going with the flow or just accepting the norms, whereas a leader is someone who will now then take initiative. Would you have to say that's the hardest part of being a leader?
Yeah, I'm so glad that question landed on me, because one of the key points, I think, for 21st century leadership is innovation. And innovation requires a lot of risk. We need to fail in order to innovate. And that's something my organization has taught me.
You need to fail in order to innovate.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I spoke about earlier on about, you know, things that were previously differentiators that are now so easily commoditized. And in order for us to stay ahead of the game and, you know, keep our competitive edge, we have to find creative and innovative solutions. And also, in order to keep our people engaged in the organization, is to find creative and innovative ways to keep them engaged, to keep them excited, and to continue enjoying the things that they do. And innovation for me is just so key. And our organization has been driving this really hard, and we've seen the difference it makes when you give people the flexibility to actually innovate, to fail. Because as I've mentioned, in order to innovate, you have to fail, and you've got to give people that freedom and flexibility to do it. It involves risks, absolutely.
Yes.
But
and anxiety and
risk,
unease.
without risk, you're never going to know if you're going to do it better. You're going to carry on doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And you can't. We just cannot afford to. We have to do things differently. And that's why, for me, innovation, we've just got to do it. There's absolutely no choice in the business world without that now.
Here we are. We have all three of you sitting here as rising stars, and as you know, we applaud and salute each and every one of you. But let's just talk about how hard the climb has been to be here right now. So when you are the one with the vision of innovation, when you are the one who is pushing this agenda, and meanwhile other people aren't getting it. And then in some cases, even though you may believe in something, you face failure. Have you ever faced that, Christelle?
Failure, absolutely.
Oh.
But from those failures, a lot of lessons.
Mm-hmm.
I think I certainly wouldn't have been where I am, taken away the award, had I not faced certain challenges.
Yeah.
And they've certainly made me a lot wiser and a little bit more adept to tough situations. And I think it's necessary. It's absolutely necessary for you sometimes to meet with failure and spend a bit of time, you know, figuring out what you would have done differently,
Yeah.
with obviously the blessing of a little bit of hindsight. But I think in terms of the challenges, getting to the top, I'm certainly not at the top yet.
Uh-huh.
I consider myself a very small fish in a giant ocean. And like a lot of people here today, I'm aspirant, and I'm wanting to learn as much as I possibly can, apply it in a way that will mean something for generations to come. And
Yeah.
I think the path from here on out will certainly be a lot tougher. I think the spotlight and the amount of sort of focus that this award has brought is certainly definitely going to add a lot more pressure
Yeah.
to
I was
actually
actually
taking
about
that
to
climb.
ask, is it pressure or is it like
I think
motivation?
it's two-sided. So there's a wonderful opportunity to obviously get to participate in conversations like this, meet new people, share ideas, and potentially start doing some really great things with the people in this room and many others like it.
Yeah.
But with the same positive opportunity to do that comes naturally the spotlight, and everybody's sort of now peering in and trying to identify where there would have been cracks, failures, concerns, issues before.
You're now being scrutinized.
And you are scrutinized. That's an absolute truth. And I think for anyone who is obviously has been identified and awarded as a rising star, I think they probably would have been faced with quite a few questions as to, well, how did that work? How did you manage to get to the finalist list? Who was on the judging panel?
Yeah.
What kind of criteria were there? And then they start to look at you in the workplace and in your personal life. Well, I don't know whether many of you volunteer like I do. They will ask, well, how did you get that award? Because on the weekends, I mean, you're quite an idiot, you know, because you kind of do different things with your spare time. But it's it certainly does come with both the positive and the negative aspects that we would have covered now in this conversation.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the other guys could probably add to that. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Lee, Michelle?
Well, I would say that failure is part of the journey of growing. And I think for all of us, including myself, you come across failures. I guess the one reflection worth sharing, I actually had a chance to share it in the panel breakaways earlier today, was one of the strategies I've had been forced to learn around work-life balance. And I think as leaders, we become overwhelmed with so much of content, so many tasks and activities. And just to very quickly tell you my reflection of when that inflection point happened, was the day I had my first kid back in 2008, and my boss calls at 10 p.m. at night, and the baby's crying. And the wife says, you choose, right?
Wow.
So that was the inflection point. You start to realize, okay, so voicemail does exist, text messages do exist. So you start to figure out, what
If
are...
only there was voicemail for crying children.
Absolutely.
Mommy, can I have a bottle just in 5 minutes' time? That'll make things easier.
So what you start to do is figure out, and this is advice I give to individuals, as leaders we're going to be conflicted by organizational core values, the organizational ethos, with that of yourself. I always tell people that I coach, first and foremost, figure out what are your personal core values. What is important to you? It could be quality of life, spending time with the kids, going for walks, volunteering. Those are your important core values. Once you've established what's important to you, then you can start to understand how what is important to you relates to your organization. Because that balance is fundamentally important. For you to give enough and get enough back is important to your longevity in your organization, but also to your growth. If you're just working, panicking all the time, there is no time to add successful contributions to your career, but also you won't be growing as an individual. So the one thing I definitely leave to this audience is figure out what's important to you. Because as a leader, if you're not sure what's important to you, how will you judge your own success? How will you be able to give back if all you're doing is stressing the entire time?
But Lee, how easy is it to make such a decision? And how long is that process? Because I'm pretty sure when you invested so much into your career, I'm not undermining a family life, et cetera, but how long is that process? Because I'm sure it's not an easy one to make.
I would say it takes a long time. I've had the opportunity to work on some really cool projects. My first project was to rebuild the elections for 1999. We walked into an empty building, we slept in the building, right? I was a single person, a bachelor, and I could do that, right? It was the most exciting period of my career where I could reflect back and say, I made a difference. Having said that, though, you've got to find balance in whatever you do. I would submit that your family, your kids, your religion may be equally or more important than your job. It's finding introspectively how those juxtapose, sit side by side for allow you to be successful in your career. Because without that commitment and support from your family, right, then you actually aren't going to be able to make the difference in the workplace. And for you to grow in your career as rapidly as some of us have, right, requires the support of this combined enabling environment.
Got it. Michelle, sticking with failure though, it's nice to be all deep and philosophical now about, oh, well, it's a lesson at the end of the day. I'm pretty certain you're not walking into the boardroom, when you've had a task and you haven't really delivered or something went wrong, to now look into your superior's eyes and say, well, at least I learned a lesson. What keeps you going in the moment of failure? What keeps you still holding your head up high and still motivated to continue on?
On a personal level, I don't take failure very easily. I don't think anybody does. So it used to affect me really deeply, but in the example that you've given now, I think transparency for me is always key. Never try to cover up what you've done wrong. I think people just have so much respect for you if you can step up and stand up for what you believe in, and even if you failed at it, just be transparent. And I think the biggest lesson is, or the biggest learning comes from what you've actually done wrong and what have you learned from it. Don't focus on the failure. Focus on the learning that came out of it and how you can use that to improve yourself in future. When I first joined my organization, I'll never forget this, I made such a big blunder, and it was escalated up to the highest point. And I thought, okay, I'm really in shit street now. And my director came up to me, and I thought I'm going to get fired. And all he asked me was, it was a costly mistake, and he said, what did you learn from it? And, it was so inspiring to see that someone wasn't looking at the failure, but rather looking at the learning that came out of it. And that's what I try to focus on. So I'm not going to be afraid to fail. I used to be.
Yeah.
But I think the message out there to everybody is focus on the learning that comes out of it and don't be afraid to fail. Because I don't think any great innovator out there went out and was really confident and said, I know that I've got a solution and it's going to work. I think they figured it out as they went along as well. But they were just brave enough. And we've had keynote speakers talk earlier on about being brave. I think there was Puti speaking about courage and being brave. And I think those qualities are so important in a leader. Have that courage. Go out, do it, fail, learn, and move on.
You know, there's an element there of just owning it, owning where you are, owning what you've done. It's really taking responsibility of where you are and what sort of actions you can go on and take. So as smart as one can be, as driven as one can be, as determined as one can be, at the end you don't know what you don't know. So how do you own it, yet still are, I don't know if humble or modest is the word, to accept when you need help, and how do you navigate that as a 21st century leader?
I think we should admit to ourselves that we always need help. And it just goes back to the point that was raised earlier around the fact that there is obviously someone out there who's a lot smarter than you. And the old adage says, 2 brains are bigger than one, 2 heads are bigger than one, or better than one, rather.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we have to just allow other people to support us in achieving that shared goal. And I think as leaders of the 21st century, there is absolutely no way that one individual can say that they and they alone have all of the answers. It is just impossible and it's unrealistic.
Yeah.
We've got to really own up to the fact that we don't know everything and that there are people out there who have the expertise and the skill to help us get to that end goal, and we need to make the best use of them.
Lee, what about you?
Well, what I would say is that we work in a very commoditized industry. So there are many things that you can actually outsource and partner with individuals to actually deliver. But to go back to your point about what makes a great leader is being able to articulate and understand the vision for what you want to achieve. If you can't communicate the vision, then those around you will be lost. So you will never get the unpacking of the vision into actionable work packages or actionable outcomes. And my observation as a consultant is that I meet lots of organizations that say, you know nothing about my industry. And I always say, give me 2 weeks and I'll know a hell of a lot. Right?
Wow.
So I would say, put in the effort required to be the leader. You've always got to be 2 steps ahead sometimes. So spend the time to understand what is required of you as a leader, understand the program, the initiative, the outcome, and then find a way to, in very clear and certain terms, articulate those to your teams around you. Then you'll start to get, number one, the belief that you are the leader that can tell your individuals and your people what's going on, and they'll start to believe in you. And more importantly, if you understand the vision, you can also check back and see whether you are in fact delivering on it. Because you get to the end of a journey where you've believed in your people, but you, the leader, can't appreciate what you're delivering on, and you will not have the outcome you see because you never saw that vision to start with.
That's interesting, though. You know, when we talk about vision, often as a leader, there you are, you have the plan, you see it all in your head. How is this hurdle of making others see and believe in your vision? Michelle, have you faced that?
Well, I think, yeah, you do, but I think the people that or the teams that are around you need to share that vision with you, or else that's all it is. It's just going to remain a vision. It's your teams that really go out there and help you implement it and make it materialize. So although it may be difficult, you've got to get people to try to understand where you're coming from, articulate it in terms that they will understand, draw pictures if you need to, and I think the most important thing is just getting them to, or communicating it in a way that they can relate, and not making it some pie in the sky type of vision that's just figures and, that they really can't have a hands-on grip on it.
Can I add something to that? I think what Michelle's alluding to, something we call the common language. Even with my own organization, I would be put into a box called, technologist, and the business folk won't always get you. And I guess the challenge when you start to bring these 2 organizations together, from practices together, is what is the common language on which you'll actually communicate what it is you want to communicate. So for example, if you're a technologist and you talk to business people, a CFO, an HR person, talk in a language that they understand and they appreciate. I think that's an important thing when you start to find buy-in or sponsorship for an idea, talking to people about things that matter in their lives, first and foremost, as opposed to getting them to come onto your side of the fence to understand what is it you want in your terms. Because it's more important to find a way for people to understand before you progress.
Yeah.
We all talk about this change journey or the change navigation journey, and the first thing is to actually get awareness and buy-in for your idea before you start to execute. And that common language, I would submit, is key to that understanding.
Of course, because you need the people there with you. You know, talking about vision, and it's all about the outlook as well of what a 21st century leader is. And taking notes during the day and listening to what the different keynote speakers had to say, I realized this, that people learn the mindset that helps them identify opportunities for change and harness the diverse skills necessary to make that change happen. The leadership mindset really doesn't have to be specific to a title or position. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So
Absolutely.
I was making the right notes today. Thank you.
So often you find that there are a lot of people, I work in the technology space as well, and obviously the very young, up-and-coming technologists are very in touch with what's happening out there because it's what they live and breathe. And they have phenomenal ideas. They see well into the future beyond what a lot of the very seasoned leaders can anticipate. And I think irrespective of their roles, irrespective of their level of seniority or within the organization, etc., we find that, you know, they are leaders, very strong leaders in their own right, whether it comes to having that vision or the ideas, or whether it's just really supporting the rest of their colleagues around a new way of working. You know, we keep talking about the way we deliver, and I think, you know, agile delivery, it's certainly a buzzword. Agile, continuous improvement, etc., is a focus area. And a lot of our juniors in the organizations are leading from that perspective. And yeah, I think irrespective of where you are, I think there is an opportunity for everyone to really play the role of a leader.
You know, I think it's one thing for us to identify 21st century leaders, but I think we now need to be starting to shape a 21st century working environment. And so with that said, what are some of the conflicts that may arise with the seasoned leaders and the 21st century leaders? And because we now have a working environment with this wide spectrum of people who bring different things to the table. And, you know, I feel like now the new buzzword is more collaboration than this hierarchy. So what sort of conflict are we seeing arising nowadays, Lee?
So I do a lot of hiring for Accenture, and I would say that there's two different ways to approach interviewing. If you're hiring millennials or individuals out of university, it's actually quite easy because they've been born into this way of working, very collaborative. They don't see color, race, creed. In fact, they actually want a partner for the outcome. However, when I hire experienced hires, I actually spend just as much time telling them why they should join my organization as to why they shouldn't join. And the things I talk about is, for example, the cultural change. It's the partnering for success, is not knowing everything, and that's just being okay. Understanding where leadership comes from. I've got youngsters that are rocket scientists that know a lot more than I will ever know. So that's the two ways to approach hiring them in. From a workplace perspective, because that's equally as important, you're starting to see that the entire workplace is moving away from the way we joined organizations 10 or 15 years ago. They're being a lot more collaborative, a lot more casual. The distinction between the work life and the personal life is almost always taken away in this new way of working. So if you can think about what it looks like to work at Google or Facebook, that's how the big corporates are starting to move towards. If you walk into an Accenture or a Bright House 6 months from now, a year from now, I would submit you'd find the exact same working experience as you would with a new age Google or Amazon to boot.
Michelle, in your point of view, what are some of the conflicts that may arise in this wide spectrum of employees? And more than that, how do we make sure that at the end of the day, we do have a cohesive working environment?
You know, I don't necessarily think the conflict is bad because, as Christelle mentioned, you have your seasoned veterans and you need that experience in the workplace. You need that kind of knowledge from the past and all of that. And you need your fresh thinking, young talent out there bringing a different perspective into it. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but I guess the way it's managed, and we need to make sure that it has positive and constructive outcomes out of it. So I think from an organizational point of view, it needs to be managed at that level to say that certain core values need to be ingrained into the DNA of the organization. You've got to have company values, and those values need to be driven right down to all your employees, and that needs to sort of bring together the unifying force between all the employees. So everyone can have their difference of opinion and debate certain points and bring together all the different perspectives. But I think there's got to be something that's guiding and at the end of the day, driving it to a unified conclusion.
So still with this whole this age gap or this wide spectrum in our work environment that we're keeping with that analogy, is there a leader? Could there be a leader in a certain situation who just is in the wrong position or in the wrong team or in the wrong department? And how do we go on actually, focusing on the individual and making sure that the individual is their best, not just the standard definition of what we see as best?
So it's the responsibility of both the individual as well as the manager to really identify whether there is another opportunity for that individual. I think, speaking to the point that Lee made earlier on, if something doesn't resonate with you, there's a high likelihood that you're just not going to succeed at it. And I think we can all say, or fairly say, that happens in just about every aspect of our lives. We join up on something and we realize that, this is actually not for me, and we don't succeed at it as a result. If it doesn't resonate with you, if it's not part of what it is that you want to achieve over time, and it's really something that you feel quite strongly attached to, you will find that people generally will not succeed at it. And I think the individual has to be honest with themselves. Management has to be honest and have those frank discussions. I think it was Dr. De Vries earlier. Was it Dr. De Vries? He was talking to us
Prinsley.
about, yes, Dr. Prinsley.
Prinsley.
Thank you. Dr. Prinsley was talking to us about the fact that we need to have that honest dialogue and really be talking about how we're actually performing. And you need to be open for the critical for those discussions. And if it's criticism, take it all as positive. Because what you take away from that is, well, if I'm not good at this one particular thing, then I will be good at something else. Because that, if it is constructive, somebody will share those insights with you, and you can take that, move on, and make the best of another opportunity.
Exactly. I'd love to, open this up to the floor as well, and maybe we just pass the microphone around, because I'm a through and through millennial. I'll be the first to admit that. And I read an article recently about, it was kind of shocking, but also at the same time with the company that I keep, I wasn't surprised, talking about the average let me phrase it correctly. A millennial is most likely to spend 2 years at a job. And because we are now guided with passion or feeling, or this doesn't just sit right with me. So I would love to know if there are seasoned, we're going to use the term seasoned, individuals in a workplace, because now it's not just about a 21st century leader, it really is about a 21st century working environment. How do you now navigate it when you're dealing with someone who's now saying, this really isn't for me? And how do you feel maybe when you just think, maybe it's a situation where they need a bit more motivation, or maybe they really aren't cut for us at all? And when do you actually make those sort of decisions, Lee?
So a few things that come to mind. Firstly, you need to, as a leader, have a cohesive view of what it is you want to achieve and how all the building blocks come together in driving an outcome. Secondly, you also recognize that certain parts of your business are actually highly commoditized. You expect to have a high turnover of staff. So with that in mind, you start to think about something we call institutional memory. So what is the actual core of what is it you do in terms of the what versus who actually does it? And what you actually find is that if you're constantly thinking about how you do things, and then regardless of who actually does it, you're able to live beyond the actual person leaving, right? So I think it's important to recognize that as an organization, you should be a lot more sustainable than having one or two people that hold up the base of the pyramid. It's got to be much broader than that. Having said that, though, you've got to make the environment one that's conducive to the individual. So we talk about something called the employee value proposition.
Okay.
And what's been important to myself joining a large organization to what's important to an individual joining an organization now is fundamentally different. For example, having a gym membership could be more important than having really good healthcare benefits. So that's the kind of
We got to
balance
club
of
the
things.
gym, but we got to club the gym.
So you've got to do the gym thing, right? But you actually got to balance these things quite nicely. And I think to the point that Michelle made earlier, if we're not sure what these things are, why don't we ask? So when we consider the product design or the strategy for your organization in terms of the employee value proposition, normally you'd have a bunch of seasoned professionals, to use your words, sitting in a room articulating what that EVP looks like. My view is rather have what we call listening clinics. Go out, listen to the people, figure out what it is they want, and give them the ultimate platform to actually stay engaged, be excited about the job they're doing. But recognize that they'll leave in any event if that's part of their personal journey. I'm one of the advocates that says the individual comes before the company. And that's an interesting thing on behalf of the organization. Because first and foremost, every individual has got to be happy in the workplace. If they aren't happy, because when they come to work, they aren't excited or passionate, they aren't going to create value for themselves or for the organization. So I'd rather find a way to have happy people work in the organization, and I'll drive better outcomes for us. And if you're sad, in many cases, I'll actually say, Sia, you look unhappy. Let me find you another opportunity. We'll work together and find you an opportunity. Because in many cases in the business I work in, people that leave become my clients, right? So to make sure you
can't
help,
burn bridges.
Absolutely. So you actually hold their hand and help them find another opportunity. And that's the reality of this post-millennial scenario, where you actually need to have a very flexible way of working, but also have that business-mindedness that says the organization is bigger than one individual. You've got to build out what we call institutional memory that tells us how we work and recognize that you could work with any combination of people anywhere in the world. That's the nature of this enabled technology that we all have at our disposal.
Michelle, do you think our working environments are moving to becoming more conducive to this type of millennial worker?
I think it has to. I don't think we can afford for it
It's not an option.
not to be. Yeah, we've got to be keeping our employees engaged. And as Lee said, it's so important to do that, but it's also one of our biggest challenges. Short tenures and frequent movement is just the norm in our industry. There's just so much opportunity out there, and there's such, great technologies and exposure to different things that keeping people engaged, as much as we want it, and we know that's the secret to actually having a productive environment, it's one of our biggest challenges. And I guess we need to find what is that secret to keeping the people like Pootie, on a Saturday saying that she's going out to shopping and actually going into the office and doing work. How do you keep people engaged at that level?
Yeah.
And we have to get better at it. We have to get better. We've absolutely got no choice in it.
Let's now talk about then, as a leader, when do you make the decision of, do I continue investing my time, my energy, my resources into building this young up-and-coming potential rising star in our company? And how do you make sure that they stay as well once you've made an investment? I think if we answer that question, everyone else can get up and we can leave, because that will solve every sort of situation.
So I think it's actually quite difficult to do. I think the nature of the millennial is to stay excited by moving around and experiencing completely different opportunities. I think the importance is for the organization to focus on how we can make sure that what we do and how we do it remains enticing and allows people to continue growing. And that really is the challenge. Speaking to Michelle's point, we really don't have a choice around moving into the future of the workplace and looking at how we can make things a lot more enticing for the younger generations to actually enjoy. When they come to work, it needs to also incorporate an aspect of play, and it has become more casual. People come to work and they certainly are blending both their personal lives and what they actually deliver from a day-to-day basis in the workplace. And I think it's quite important for us to focus on how we're going to facilitate that. I know that where I work, there is certainly a shift taking place, a massive shift. I joined
Okay.
5 years ago. There were cubicles. You didn't see the person to your left and your right. And now that's all coming down. People are working a lot more collaboratively. People are chatting directly. Everything has become visual. We're all looking at the same things, speaking the same language. And I think that is what is enticing a lot of graduates into joining the financial services industry. I think as an industry, it's certainly also moving forward.
Yeah.
And digitization, et cetera, is a huge focal point. And that for them is an absolute attraction because, like I say, it's part of their DNA now. It's,
Yeah.
It's the way they live. And I think, as an organization, certainly every single organization needs to look at how we actually make that enticing and create a workplace that really lends to the new generation how they want to work, how they want to interact.
Yeah. Lee, Michelle, is that the same in your case?
So I think it's a whole mindset change as well. I walked into clients' offices recently, brand new offices, and had a very Google type feel to it, and lots of coffee shops and cubicles and all of that. And I said, wow, when do you guys work? Do you actually find time to work with all of these nice things around? And the response was, this is work. And that's exactly the mind shift or mindset change that we need to make, is that work needs to be fun. That's the new generation. Things need to be fun. You need to keep them engaged and excited, and it needs to be fun. It can't be, like in decades ago where you're going in 9-to-5 job, walking into your office, doing your filing and doing whatever, and it was very, predictable. Exactly. It's got to be fun. It's got to be exciting, and it's got to be empowering as well. So I mean, the one thing is the environment. But also at an individual level, you've got to empower people. You've got to allow them to make decisions. You've got to let them be involved in key activities. It's not manager-driven anymore and instruction-led. You've got to involve them and empower them. And to any individual, to be empowered at that level and to be involved at that level is just growth for them, and it's exciting. It makes work fun.
Are we now going to see more of a Branson trend where, Sir Richard Branson believes, you know what, you can work wherever as long as the work is done? Are we now going to see our superior rock up to work in shorts and will be casual Monday to Friday? Is that the new trend?
It's happening.
Even though certain people we don't want to see wearing shorts.
No, absolutely.
Is that
but it's a reality.
Will
it's
that
happening.
just be the thing?
It's happening. So, years gone by, everybody rocked up to work with a suit. I work with an incredible group of people. They show up in Bermudas and slip-flops.
Wow.
And they've got sometimes a little bit of a hole in the T-shirt. But trust me, they make things happen. They make things happen in the flip-flops and in their very casual sort of way of going about business. They are collaborating like never before.
Yeah.
The amount of ingenuity coming out of those coffee conversations, the ideas, just phenomenal. It's absolutely, the change is here, is really what I have to say to you. It's not coming.
It's already here.
Sure.
Lee, do you agree with that?
Absolutely. I think in my organization, I've actually started to commission projects to digitize the workplace, to create this enabling environment. I actually spoke to our HR director last week to say we need to revisit those policies, right? Because dressing the way I am, that's great, the kind of conversations I have, but I need to recognize that I need to interplay with people that don't look or sound or behave like me. It's that combination of teaming that will drive the outcomes that we want. So that's very important. I do want to take the opportunity to go back to your previous question about, when you talk about the workplace and the EVP, it's probably a fundamental thing, if I reflect on my own career, that's kept me in the organization. I work in a place that is, I would say, a career-based organization versus a job-based organization.
Okay, can you
And
explain the difference
that's
between
very
the two as well?
important. So many people go into a job that has a set description, the role, the responsibilities, the objectives. And when the millennial leaves, in my observation, they would leave because they're bored, they want to do something different. But now you're stuck in a very confined space. Whereas most career-based organizations, it actually promotes you moving around. So an organization would rather me move from one technology to the other, or from strategy to technology, if that's the case, and still get the IP, the investment they've made in myself, then let me go. So I think the walls will start to collapse. the walls of collaboration between us as individuals, the walls between divisions of your organization, the walls between organizations. So be co-opetition, partnering between the township economy and the mainstream economy in something we call bridge making. Those have become par for the course of how we execute. It's all part of a big partner ecosystem, and actually you will see very, very few instances of individuals succeeding by themselves in their own myopic silo. Those walls are going to be broken, and that started already.
I just want to now talk about something Terence Harrison from ArcelorMittal mentioned a little earlier in his address. And he spoke about asking young, talented people what engages you. So I want to pose that question to the three of you first and foremost. Michelle, what engages you?
So I think having the freedom to make my own decisions, so not having to run everything past, my seniors or execs, is just having that freedom and flexibility to innovate and try different things. And if I do fail at it, it's accepted as part of the journey, the learning journey, and it's not seen as a personal failure. So I like that freedom to try new things.
Are we seeing now as well, is it going to come to a situation, or has it already come to a situation where in a job interview, talking to a potential employee, where it's now a thing where, well, listen, if what engages me is the fact that I like my freedom and the fact that I don't want to report to a supervisor every single, at the end of every single day. Has it reached that point?
Well, it's funny you talk about the interview process, because it's really the tables have turned in that instance. Before you'd find yourself, if you're interviewing people, they're basically selling their profiles to you. And whereas now, with the amount of or the scarcity of skills that we have there, we're sitting on the other side and we're actually selling the vision and dreams of the company to that person in the hopes of onboarding them.
Wow.
So it's attracting and retaining talent is a core challenge in any one of our industries, and as leaders it remains a big challenge. And I think it's very important to identify that talent and to be able to give them or see what actually is going to empower them and is going to motivate them, and be able to give them that flexibility to do so.
Got it. Christelle, in your opinion, what engages you?
To be quite honest, really, it has to resonate with me. So Sia, I spoke about it briefly. The reason why I do what I do, I know that I'm changing people's lives, and I know how we're doing that, and I know why we're doing it. When you understand that, it becomes easy to stay engaged, because you know what the purpose of this engagement is all about. And it's not to go there and collect a paycheck every month on the 20th, 25th, 31st, or 1st, depending on where you are employed. If that is the case, then you need to move. Because I think we are certainly getting to a place now, and this is just globally, where the need for leaders who are wanting to make a difference to society at large, the world, not just their bank balance, we are desperately in need of those. And not for 1 second should we underestimate how important it is for us to identify with what it is that we do every day. I think we have now reached a point where we actually need to be quite honest with ourselves. Look at what we do every day and really assess whether we think we are making a difference. And if you feel you can make a difference someplace else, go and do that.
And it goes back to that situation of honest conversations.
Absolutely.
100%. Lee, what do you have to say? What engages you?
I would say what engages me the most is the ability to solve really cool problems. So in the last 10 years, I've been working in transformation.
Then you are employee number one. Everyone now wants to recruit you.
So let me tell you what I've done. So normally I get a call when someone's about to be fired, has been fired.
Yes.
They have been fired, they're not sure what to do thereafter. So it's normally when there's really a problem that something's been broken and you've got to find a solution. And like to our conversation over the last hour, it's about finding solutions where you haven't been able to describe the problem yet.
Whoa, hold up. Now that's a big one. Finding solutions where you haven't even
figured out what the problem is. So
Oh.
all you know is what the symptom of the problem is.
Uh-huh.
And many people that I speak to actually, I want you to do A, B, and C. That's the way. And that's probably the worst way to start, a transformation exercise.
Yeah.
So I spend a lot of time with my teams demystifying what's actually wrong before piecing together how you respond to that. And to me, that's exciting when you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Having to figure it out and tell the client or the organization, I'm going to hold your hand and we're going to fix this together. And that's what motivates me.
Wow. I would like
You can't have my job. No?
Although
Damn it.
technically we're all solving problems, because if that wasn't the case, we'd all be unemployed.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, what I'm sort of seeing, the common thread between all three of you and the way you light up when you now talk about your, I won't even call it a job, your career, and how invested you are in it. I think it's a situation of your vision aligning with your company's vision. So what happens in an instant, we see it, it's a prime case right now, where it does align here, we are three rising stars, but what happens when your vision doesn't align with the company's vision? Is it something that can be resolved, or is it something where you have to pull yourself out of the situation and probably work elsewhere?
Well, I'll start.
Uh-huh.
My colleagues are, it's a tough one, I guess.
Well,
right?
because you have already found the solution to our problem question.
So I would say that you get to a point where you will come to a crossroads where you need to decide. As the individual under consideration, if you're not sure what those values are that you hold true to yourself, then it'll be very, very difficult to figure out whether you stay or go. So my advice, number one, is figure out what's important to you. If you do get to the crossroads and what you need from the organization isn't what the organization is able to give you, then I'll happily help you to find another job or help you get your resume ready. And that's
Yeah.
an important thing, because you want the happy employee. Even for myself, I know what's important to me, and because I work in an organization that's flexible to my growth objectives, I'm able to do that. But if I get to the point where we do find ourselves at the crossroads, then we should both be brave enough as organization individuals to say, it's not making sense. You could have a lot more value going to a competitor, a new industry. But that reflection starts, to your point about the two visions. I say it's the correlation of two sets of core values. When those stop aligning, then you have an inflection point. And that's when hard decisions need to happen.
Michelle, Christelle?
And I think, to Lee's point, I think everyone must be reminded, and we must remind ourselves that no matter what fancy title is out there, whether it's GM or MD or whatever it is, we're still human beings. We're still people. There's still the human element, and we still need to be personally engaged. Like you're talking about what you're saying here, if that level of personal engagement wasn't there, we wouldn't light up. And the moment that stops happening at a personal level, then you know that there isn't that alignment and it isn't going to work. And no matter how long you stay there or how hard you try, you're not going to give off your best anymore. So it's pointless for yourself and for the company. So at that point, it's just not working.
I'd like to know, sitting where all three of you are now, you've done great things in your careers, you are rising stars. I would have that labeled on my car driving around for everybody to realize that. I'm not even joking, I'd put a billboard outside of my house even.
Hashtag rising star.
I would everywhere wear branded t-shirts. Are you happy or are you content?
In the context of what, winning the
With
awards?
your
With
success
the
thus
okay.
far and your career as well.
I don't think I would say I'm content. I think, speaking to my point earlier, there's just so much to achieve. There's still so much to accomplish. There's no way you can say, well, I've reached that pinnacle and it's done for me and I'm just going to bask in the sun. If you're at that point, then you're obviously not growing anymore. I think for me, and I'm sure my colleagues will probably want to maybe elaborate on this in terms of how they feel personally. For me, I think this is just a starting point. This has been a wonderful opportunity to actually have folks, really recognize the success that we have had to date. But I think more so, there's actually a real big responsibility here. And with that, we now have to obviously focus on, well, what is this next big challenge? What are we going to be doing to actually ensure continuous growth? And what am I doing day to day just to make sure that I'm looking out for a new opportunity to keep growing, learning, and obviously, and lastly, not forgetting, sharing that knowledge or helping to grow other people.
Yes.
And I think That's how I feel right now.
Lee, are you happy or content?
I'm very happy where I am right now. I think
Just not content.
not content, because content, to Christelle's point, is around almost assuming that where you find yourself right now is at end point. And I almost think you almost to be very uncomfortable all the time. It sounds a bit crazy. It's almost a counterpoint. But you've got to have that edginess saying, what next, what next? And as a true leader, I believe that all of us should be thinking 2 steps ahead. What's next in line? When you do accomplish this next goal, what's lined up for you? Because not just for yourself, but your teams are looking for those answers as well.
Michelle, what about you?
I'm not happy, I'm ecstatic about winning the award. Content to me also, like my colleagues say, it almost has that connotation of being, complacent.
Yeah.
So I think, as Christelle said, my personal experience is this has just been the starting point. And my son's life slogan is, with great power comes great responsibility. And it really is that, if you're representing your industry and representing your organization, go out there and step up and be a shining star.
So it's actually interesting that our conversation has now led to another note that I made during the course of the day, and that is life is full of leadership opportunities, and that's the truth of it. Every time a person reaches a plateau, wanting to progress beyond the plateau, to improve, produce more significant results, that is the leadership opportunity. So in looking at problems as opportunities, now in retrospect, for the 3 of you, what would you have to say has been the greatest opportunity for success that you've encountered in what other people would deem a failure or a bump in the road that you actually got over?
Sure. So for me personally, I think, and I'm just going to speak to an actual event, was where we were responsible for delivering on something, and practically the team gave up, and half of the folk left and said, well, that's it, we're throwing in the towel. This is just too difficult and near impossible to achieve, and so that's that. And when you're faced with something like that, you have one of 2 options you can follow. And say,
And
well,
also throw in the towel.
great, let's go and do something else that might have a higher rate or a higher chance of success. Or you can say, well, here's an opportunity for us to do something near impossible.
Yes.
If we don't achieve it, well, then we would have learned what was possible. And if we do, well, then
Yeah.
we've accomplished the near impossible, right? And I think it's really important for each of us to stay focused. And for me, that one opportunity certainly was in the face of it. It was a horrible situation. You wouldn't want to find yourself in it. But when you are faced with something like that and you actually do pick up that baton and continue to actually run that race,
Yes.
then good on you, because that's where the opportunities come from. I think I certainly wouldn't have been recommended even or put forward for this award
Yes.
had I not found myself in that situation.
And there's no sweeter success than knowing that
No,
you overcame a hurdle like that. Lee, in your own experience?
Well, the one example I can think of is quite recent, in the last 5 years, where I did in fact fail, or we all failed as a massive program. And we all knew starting the program that this wasn't going to work. But I think every difficult opportunity is it's an opportunity to learn and grow. And that's the way you've got to see these things, right? You may not get to the outcome, and you may actually change direction. In the case of this program, we basically proved that the way it wanted to be done could not be done, and had to be rerouted completely. And it's now taking a much better direction. But when I walk away, a lot of my skills on politics, relationship, issue, risk management, governance, things that you almost want to have refreshers in and almost become part of your arsenal for firefighting,
Yes.
you start to refine that. So I think every opportunity that's difficult is an opportunity to learn and grow. And like Michelle said earlier, if you aren't confronted with the possibility of failure, you will not push yourself to come up with new, innovative, and disruptive solutions. And I think that is really where the real value comes in. All the simple problems have been solved. It's this new wave of problems, opportunities that bring together things like Uber and Airbnb and threats that you can't physically see, and they just come along and happen. And I think that's the opportunity where failure, which was perceived failure, allows us to step in and learn and grow.
And lastly, Michelle?
I'm going to tell you a short story. When I went for the interview for the organization I am in now, interview went great, and at the end of it, we really had good rapport with the person that was interviewing me, and at the end of it, he said, so why would you like to be, to get this position? And he mentioned the name of the position, and I said, I don't, that's not what I came here for. And the agency had completely messed it up and sent me in for the wrong position. So we were both feeling really embarrassed, and then he said, so what do we do now? So he just asked me, he said, so would you like to do this? And I said, well, I'll give it a shot. And he gave me the opportunity, and that's where I am today.
Wow.
And it was completely outside of my area of comfort, outside of my domain experience, but it was just the opportunity that was needed, and I found what could have been a complete failure has worked out brilliantly for me.
Wow. Look at that. So much more that we could definitely chat to the three rising stars about. But before we continue on and we wrap the conversation up, I'd like to open it up to the audience. Anyone have any questions or comments before we wrap up? This is your moment with rising stars, who tomorrow should have billboards outside of their house. We have one question here in front.
Hi, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Randu. I want to congratulate the panel. You guys have spoken such inspiring words. Basically, my question, I'd like to find out, we're talking about the changing world and how the next leader, the new leader, needs to be, forward thinking. So what are some of the lessons that you would say a future leader needs to unlearn? So basically, leave yourself open to new ideas in order to stay relevant within this changing environment. So what would you say leaders need to unlearn? Thank you.
Oh, wow.
So one of the first things that comes to mind, I would say, is stop being predictable. As I've mentioned, our industry is so unpredictable these days, and if we, continue to think in a predictable way, we're not going to be able to respond to the fast-changing environment. So we need to always be flexible and open and unlearn the predictability.
Mm-hmm.
If I can add, I would say, and I've mentioned this point earlier, I tell lots of people, don't assume that you know everything. Don't assume that we've hired you because you have every single answer to every single question. And part of the unlearning, I think, as a leader is exactly that point. Don't walk into a situation presuming or assuming things. And if you do that, you kind of lock yourself very myopically into an answer box, whereas Michelle or Christel, together as a partnership, you could solve a lot more. So I think from an unlearning perspective, I think it starts there, recognizing that you coexist as part of a team, and that collaboration will drive your very success.
I think for me, telling people how to do things is definitely the one thing that leadership in this century and beyond are going to absolutely have to let go of. Speaking to the way the world of work is changing, I think it's critical that the people who are doing the work, the people who are delivering on that work, decide how things get done. Lee spoke about the vision earlier on, and as a leader, you're responsible for a vision. There has to be a very clear, concise plan, and there has to be a very clear, concise set of goals that we need to achieve. How people go about doing that is best left to them. And I think for those who had joined in the Apollo mission earlier today, it would have been a huge aha moment for the participants, because we found that a lot of people were very good at communicating one way. So we've been taught that good leaders are leaders who are able to command or pass some kind of command forward to a group of people or an individual, and they need to then execute on that.
Yeah.
And very few of us were actually very good at receiving and listening and processing what the other guys were saying. For the 21st century leader, if you really want to unlearn the bad habits, the one bad habit that will certainly make a huge difference, it's remembering not to always command, but to listen. Really listen.
Fantastic stuff. Are there any other questions before we wrap things up? Awesome. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Rising Stars. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks,
Michelle Ramnath, General Manager at Bright House. Lee Nike as well. Oh, still there's that Michelle fan. Can we at least have a fan for Lee as well? A round of applause to Lee. And of course, Christelle Sampson as well. Thank you so much for joining me up on stage. Thank you so much. What a conversation. What a conversation.